Good afternoon. Defense Subcommittee will come to order. The topic of today's hearing is oversight of the Department of the Air Force. We have three witnesses before us today: Acting Secretary of the Air Force, Gary Ashworth. And Gary, we all like you, but hopefully your replacement will be confirmed here shortly. General David Alvin, Chief of Staff of the Air Force, and General Chance Saltzman, Chief of Staff, Space Operations. Secretary Ashworth, welcome to the subcommittee. General Alvin, General Saltzman, welcome back. Obviously, we all know the administration released the skinny budget. The chairman here said it took him a whole 15 seconds to read it, so it was pretty skinny. So for the fiscal year 2026 last Friday, this request includes more than $1 trillion overall for the national defense. However, it does so by assuming $113 billion in funds through reconciliation. The reconciliation process is not a sustainable approach to resourcing defense, and it's not a substitute for regular appropriations. We are awaiting full details behind the Pentagon's request, but I'm glad the administration has prioritized the significant funding for defense, especially to modernize the nation's nuclear deterrent and to support American space superiority. While we'll be limited in discussing specifics of the FY26 budget, I would like to hear about your priorities for next year. I'd like to hear about your approach to leading the Air Force and Space Force in an increasingly dynamic and complex world. From my perspective, you've got your work cut out for you, absolutely. The Air Force has had its share of challenges, including the Sentinel-Nunn-McCurdy breach, a number of cost overruns, schedule delays that have resulted in less Air Force, not more. I was pleased, however, the Air Force will be moving forward with the F-47, the next generation air dominance platform, which was unfortunately delayed at the direction of the former Secretary. This craft, I think, will be critical in the future of air superiority. Given the priority of this program, I expect that it will be appropriately resourced in the President's budget submission. The program also needs to be rigorously managed to ensure that it remains on time and on budget. We can't have another repeat of the F-35 program. I've said it before, but quantity has a quality unto itself. The Air Force has been challenged in both procuring the air platforms it needs and adequately sustaining the air platforms it has. Turning to space, Space Force continues to have an acquisition challenge as well, such as the GPS OCX program, which is more than 7 years late. I'd like to get an update on Space Force's progress in fielding more resilient space systems. Our adversaries are rapidly expanding and enhancing their space capability to challenge the United States. I'd also like to understand more about the plans for the Golden Dome missile defense shield. This committee needs to have a clear understanding of the Golden Dome concept. Specifically, what is the Golden Dome? Is it technically feasible? How much will it cost? And who's in charge? Overall, I remain very concerned that the Department of Defense continues to struggle with delivering critical capability on time and on budget. To be blunt, I think the defense acquisition system is broken and an urgent action is needed to address these programs. So I'm pleased to see that the President signed an executive order earlier this month directing the Secretary of Defense to review the antiquated defense acquisition process, address burdensome regulations, make recommendations to incentivize the acquisition workforce, to utilize innovative acquisition authorities, and take measured and calculated risk. I would like to note that nearly 50 years ago, Admiral Hyman Rickover, father of the nuclear Navy, testified before this subcommittee about the core problems in managing complex development programs. It was right here in this very room. Rickover observed that the military rotation system, where the program managers are replaced every 2 or 3 years, was a major cause of problems. Rickover testified that due to the short of duration in the job, program managers, quote, have only the shallowest knowledge of the theory of the techniques they must deal with and little experience with the practical problems involved. And they are never kept long enough on the job to acquire such skill and knowledge. Before the results are in, the manager will have moved on, and a new manager, equally unqualified technically, will take his place. Rickover continued, "Naturally, the new manager will feel no responsibility for prior decisions and actions. His primary ambition will be to keep the program moving in the hope that it will not fail during his own tour. Thus, responsibility cannot be fixed, and there is no bound to the little continuity and technical direction for most of the defense developments underway today." I believe Rickover's assessment is as true today as it was then. So I hope senior leadership in the department takes Rickover's assessment to heart, because fixing acquisition will be critical for the department to deliver the weapon systems and capability the nation needs. Furthermore, you're keenly aware of my unwavering support for innovation. The department has made progress in this area through the Defense Innovation Community of Entities, often referred to as DICE, which includes several of your organizations. The Defense Innovation Unit leads the DICE. It's my expectation that the services collaborate with DIU and optimize the rigor of mature program executive offices with DIU's flexibility and proximity to extraordinary technological hubs to partner on innovative solutions addressing combatant commanders' needs. And finally, it's worth noting that we are in the process of consultation direction by the full-year continuing resolution for defense. While we are all disappointed that we did not complete a regular defense appropriation bill for fiscal year 25, I'm interested in hearing how the Department of the Air Force will navigate the remainder of the year. We'll work closely with you throughout this budget process to find ways we can accelerate the fielding of the platforms needed by our warfighters today. With that, I'm happy to yield to my friend, the ranking member, Ms. McCollum, for any opening remarks she would like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for extending me this courtesy. Good afternoon. I'd also like to welcome Acting Secretary Ashworth, Generals Saltzman and Alban. It's a distinguished panel that's here, but as the chair pointed out, we look forward to having a conversation with the upcoming Secretary of Air Force about the budget after confirmation. We know that the Senate has been having conversations, but our members too would like to understand the priorities that he's going to be putting forth. This is our first hearing with the administration's release of the skinny budget. I'd like to take a few minutes to acknowledge what the administration is proposing. For defense discretionary spending, President Trump is proposing $893 billion request, essentially what President Biden would have proposed. This is effectively a freeze from the current fiscal year. Any increases beyond that are assumed through the reconciliation process, which the authorizers control. No one will be shocked to learn that I don't think that reconciliation is a responsible way to appropriate defense dollars. The committee is constitutionally responsible for the allocation of DoD resources, and we should be controlling the process. Appropriating defense dollars through reconciliation undermines the authority and the jurisdiction of the Appropriations Committee. Now, the administration of both parties have tried before to move money from the discretionary budget into mandatory spending. This is not a new trick, but this is something normally done without any defense spending involved. And that's because reconciliation bill may not become the law. If it does not, the committee cannot guarantee that the DoD priorities will be backfilled through the appropriations process. Next, we know the programs for clean energy and climate resilience have been cut by the administration. As leaders of the Air Force and Space Force, you cannot afford to take your eyes off the cost of climate change. Islands in the Pacific are not easily places to get shipping materials to or to build and maintain infrastructure in. It's difficult to protect them from the impacts of climate disruption. Just look at the typhoon that hit Guam 2 years ago. $180 billion in additional funding was required to support the construction, planning, and design of facilities on Guam that were destroyed. The continuing resolution last December carried an additional $3.4 billion in repair costs for other catastrophic weather events. That's over $5 billion in taxpayers' money that they had to spend on the impacts of climate change within the Department of Defense. That's not waste, that's not fraud, that's not abuse, or any other kind of political spin. It is necessary to prepare, to protect, and replace critical infrastructure that our war fighters depend upon. Climate disruption will not just go away by a wish and a prayer. It is something we have to plan for, deal with, and expect to happen into the future. Now, turning to major programs, Air Force and Space Force have big bills due right now. Sentinel program, has been mentioned, is ballooning, $141 billion, and that's from an original estimate of $78 billion. The schedule is wildly off track from where it needs to be. Next Generation Air Dominance program is planned to exceed $23 billion, and the price per plane is a serious consideration. Next, Air Force One is behind schedule, and the Air Force has asked for more money to get that back on track. Progress has been made on the parked F-35s, and that's good news, although it was bad news for us to read recently in the paper. The world's top jet fighter is about to get more expensive because of the president's tariffs. But there's more to get those planes, more that needs to be done to get those planes delivered. And the capabilities that the service needs depends on those planes being delivered. And then, of course, there are new requirements, as the chair mentioned now. Golden Dome, a missile defense program that has yet to be fully articulated by the administration. These are problems that must be fixed through proper program management, planning, and resources, as the chairman pointed out. Finally, I want to comment on the administration's approach to personnel management. There is no question that there's a culture of fear developing across the federal government as this administration continues to demean and demoralize federal employees. I have spoken with far too many of them. People have been fired without cause. People have been asked to quit and, quote, find higher productive jobs in the private sector. I wish the Department of Defense had been immune to this, but it's not. I've had conversations with the services and especially Space Force about how do we build a first-class workforce. Secretary Hassett's goal is to remove 60 to 70,000 civilians across DOD. Now, civilians are raising their hands not to serve, but they're raising their hands to leave. Who will be around to manage the contracting process if DOD needs to get major programs back on track? We are already living with the impacts of what happens when civilians take a buyout and stop working on contracts. The contract isn't signed, the mission doesn't get done, the programs fall behind, and it costs the taxpayers more. There will be real ramifications to our national security because of the administration's personnel policies. We need to do something, sure, but let's not take a chainsaw to it. Let's take a scalpel to what we need to do with our personnel policies. So, gentlemen, I want to thank you again for appearing here today. I want to thank you for your service, to the service of the airmen, guardians, and civilians serving alongside you. And Mr. Chair, once again, I thank you for the courtesy, and I yield back.
I thank the gentlelady, and now turn to my good friend from Oklahoma, Chairman Cole, for his remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member McCollum. It's always great to be with both of you. I want to thank the witnesses, obviously, for being here with us today to discuss the current lay of the land for the Department of the Air Force. Acting Secretary Ashworth, welcome. To the Defense Subcommittee, General Zalvin and Saltzman, nice to see you this afternoon. You're sitting here before us as the Air Force and the Space Force face a critical path ahead. The world continues to be a volatile place with malign actors challenging American interests near and far. Time is not on our side as our adversaries have been outpacing and outproducing us. We're at a pivotal moment where we need the Air Force and the Space Force that we have today to deter future conflict tomorrow. I'm concerned that it's been taking us too long to acquire new aircraft, weapon systems, and space capabilities. And I'm interested in hearing how the Department of the Air Force views managing risk as it pivots some missions from aircraft to space. For years, I've expressed serious concerns about capability gaps during transitions from one platform to the next. Given the challenges, geostrategic complexities present today, this is certainly not a time to impose additional budgetary, programmatic, and national security risks. The future of air power depends on multitasking. We need to modernize and move into the next generation of air superiority while simultaneously sustaining our inventory of aircraft. Unfortunately, over time, we've seen an erosion of some of the basics that are going to require your attention. One of these areas is manufacturing. Critical aspects of our industrial base have atrophied, and we need to rapidly address aging and obsolete parts across platforms. There's an opportunity to not just grow relevant technical skills, but to also have a modernized and agile approach moving forward. I'd like to hear your thoughts on advanced manufacturing capability in this country and the benefit it might have for the Air Force. Modern deterrence hinges on the success of our air and space forces. I look forward to being able to see where resources will be applied for these efforts in fiscal year 2026. I'm also encouraged to see the total amount in the defense submission will top $1 trillion. This top line demonstrates a strong commitment to national security, although I would also say I share the concerns the chairman and the ranking member have about proceeding by reconciliation instead of normal appropriations process. We're creating a cliff out there for somebody, whoever the next president's going to be, and that's a very dangerous thing to do. We also need the line-by-line budget details for the committee to get to work in earnest to uphold fiscal discipline and effective governance. The committee's prepared to do the hard work and produce appropriations bills by the end of the fiscal year, but we'll need the military to provide timely responses to inquiries after the budget is actually submitted in full. And we look forward to your cooperation on that. I know you'll do everything you can to get us the information we need. Again, I want to thank all of you for being here, and with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. Gentlemen, your full testimony will be placed in the record. Please give us a brief summary of statements, and start with you, Secretary Ashworth. You're recognized.
Chairman Calvert, Ranking Member McCollum, and distinguished subcommittee members, General Alvin, and General Saltzman and I would like to thank you for the opportunity to testify on behalf of the Department of the Air Forces.
You might want to put the mic a little bit closer to you.
On behalf of the Department of the Air Force's FY26 budget request. The Department of the Air Force is at an inflection point. We are engaged in a fast-paced race for technological superiority against a well-resourced strategic opponent. However, we simultaneously face personnel and platform challenges affecting our immediate readiness. We must balance our requirement to generate readiness and project power today with the imperative to rebuild our military and develop capabilities so that we can continue deterring our adversaries tomorrow. Our fiscal priorities are focused on addressing the balance between these realities and supporting the United States national security objectives as outlined in the interim National Defense Strategic Guidance. The scope and severity of the threats to our homeland and national interests are significant and increasing, and we now face one of the most dangerous security environments in our history. The Department of the Air Force has structured our long-term strategy around the belief that China is our pacing threat, and this reality directly influences the department's fiscal priorities. China's defense budget has nearly doubled during the past 11 years, growing 6% annually on average. U.S. defense spending has seen around a 3% growth over the same period, increasing below the rate of inflation over the last 5 years. And many of our allies and partners' defense spending rates are even lower. These limitations have allowed China to seize an advantage. We know that everyone on this committee recognizes the importance of timely and consistent funding for our military, and we truly thank you for your support. Defending the homeland is the Department of the Air Force's #1 priority. We will do so by continuing to modernize our nuclear forces, especially through the Sentinel, the B-21, and the long-range standoff programs, as well as nuclear command, control, and communication systems that support those. We are also eager to support the President's Golden Dome for America. While still in the conceptual stage, there is no question that the Department of the Air Force will have a significant role to play on that project. Our next priority is to deter China. We'll do this through investments in our people, our readiness, and our posture within the Indo-Pacific region. We believe that our people are and will continue to be one of our nation's key competitive advantages. We are working to train our airmen and guardians to confront the brutal challenges that warfare without sanctuary presents. We are emphasizing readiness standards by creating new inspections, assessments, and exercises geared towards preparing our personnel for that environment. And finally, we are strengthening our posture within the Indo-Pacific region, conducting high-level operational exercises that will test our ability to deploy and operate in those contested environments. Lastly, the Department of the Air Force is prepared to provide critical capabilities and forces to the joint warfighter in order to defeat our adversaries if our deterrence fails. We will concentrate our efforts in two areas. First, our ability to fight tonight, and second, our ability to fight in the future. Through our current and future investments, the Department aims to establish a balanced, high-low mix of combat capabilities optimized to project power both from within and outside of the adversary's threat environment. The Department of the Air Force is also looking to streamline our forces wherever possible. This includes finding creative ways to remove excess infrastructure and retire obsolete inventory. We also recognize our need and responsibility to pass an audit as soon as possible, and we are working to make that a reality. The Department of the Air Force is extremely proud. I'm extremely proud of all of our airmen, our guardians, defending our great nation and its interests every hour of every day. We commit to working with this committee to secure a timely enactment of the FY26 budget request, which will directly support our airmen and our guardians in their uncompromising mission. We thank you for your time today, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Now recognize General Alvin for your remarks.
Good afternoon, Chairman Calvert, Ranking Member McCollum, and Chairman Cole, and all the distinguished members of this subcommittee. Today I'm proud to represent the 677,000 total force airmen serving our nation. I want to thank you for your support, not only for those airmen, but for their families as well. I'd like to open by expressing my immense pride in the exemplary performance of our airmen in securing a homeland and deployed worldwide. From the Indo-Pacific to the Middle East to our southern border, they are working around the clock to deliver air power anytime, anywhere to protect the U.S. The strategic landscape has shifted dramatically. We now operate in a world where the PRC is not only rapidly modernizing its military, but doing so with a clear intent to coerce its neighbors and reshape the international order. In parallel, we're seeing unprecedented threats to our homeland and a PRC nuclear breakout that demands unmatched nuclear deterrent capabilities. These converging pressures make one thing clear. The U.S. must maintain air power dominance if we are to safeguard our security, deter aggression, and prevail in conflict. This is not a future challenge. This is today's reality. To achieve peace through strength, we must adapt and evolve. Reinforced by our most recent interim National Defense Strategic Guidance, our Air Force has three enduring priorities. First, we must defend the homeland. Air and missile threats are evolving both in speed and sophistication. The ability to detect, track, and defeat those threats in real time is foundational to our national defense, and it's non-negotiable. Simultaneously, the U.S. Air Force provides a reliable and effective, safe two-thirds of the nuclear deterrent that is the backbone of strategic stability. These priorities are paramount, cannot fail, and must be given equal weight. Finally, we must project power globally, either independently or as part of the joint force, to rapidly respond anywhere and deter aggression and win. This is what makes our Air Force unique, and it is needed now more than ever. To achieve these priorities, we're asking for sustained support for our modernization and the development of our new capabilities. The upcoming FY26 budget request is designed to build a force aligned with today's operational realities as well as tomorrow's opportunities and threats. This means preserving current readiness and optimizing our force design tailored for contested environments, one that blends next-generation aircraft, autonomous systems, and resilient command and control. Our modernization efforts to rebuild our military include the continued development of the F-47 and the integration of collaborative combat aircraft to expand the combat mass at lower cost. We're also upgrading the F-35 and F-15 to keep pace with evolving threats. These platforms are critical not just to maintain parity, but to retain the edge our warfighters need. And at the same time, we are recapitalizing aging fleets essential to maintain power projection. Our investment in nuclear modernization remains a top priority, funding directed towards the Sentinel program, the B-21 radar, and the revitalized B-52 fleet. These systems will anchor our strategic deterrent for decades to come. Equally important is the investment in our airmen. We are enhancing recruiting, expanding training opportunities, and strengthening family support structures. We suffered a recruiting setback due to the year-long continuing resolution and the subsequent reduction of nearly $500 million in our military personnel account. This will result in our inability to fund the recruitment of 3,000 Americans who want to join our Air Force. We've got to do a better job on this. We don't just need more Air Force, we need more capable one. We need more tooth, less tail, a force that can deliver rapid, decisive blows and reposition quickly for the next fight. That means divesting from aging systems and unused infrastructure while investing in platforms and people that enhance our warfighting capacity. More means more options for our nation, enhanced homeland defense, strengthened deterrence, and unmatched power projection. It means a force that is strategically postured to deny adversaries. No other service can match what the Air Force delivers. Effects anywhere in the globe at any scale on minimal notice. Our airmen are the best in the world, ready to win today and to build the enduring force for tomorrow. With your support, we can ensure the Air Force remains the cornerstone of American power through the 21st century. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General Alvin. Now recognize General Saltzman for your remarks.
Chairman Calvert, Ranking Member McCollum, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for your continued support and the opportunity to testify on the Space Force's posture for FY26. Never before in our history has space been more critical to the future of our nation. Satellites underpin our economic prosperity, enabling everything from transportation and communication to agriculture and finance. Space has likewise become the backbone of our national security. Today's joint force is built around the assumption that space power will be there when needed. GPS allows our forces to mass and maneuver fires. Satellite communications ensure global C2 of our operations. Satellites offer constant vigilance on the battlefield, alerting America's forces of missile launches and adversary action. All of these effects and more are provided by your U.S. Space Force. With about 3% of the DoD budget and less than 1% of the personnel, the Space Force is a great value proposition for the department. For this tiny fraction of resources, you enable a service that has become indispensable for modern power projection. However, despite the dramatic rise in space threats and the increasing importance of space, over the last few budget cycles, the Space Force has experienced shrinking resources. This disconnect between value and investment creates risk for our nation. Further exacerbating the situation, the Space Force has been asked to accept new responsibilities and missions, forcing tough choices between delayed readiness, reduced capacity, or unaddressed vulnerabilities. To illustrate my point, in the past 3 years, the U.S. Space Force has been asked to take on new missions like ground and air moving target indicator, adding new space control capabilities and taking on additional responsibilities associated with modeling and simulation, force design analytics, and a threefold increase in launch tempo at our national spaceports, and new advanced training requirements. These requirements have driven the need for increases in strength, military construction projects, new education and training curriculum, and expanded information technology requirements. The most recent addition to our mission set is the space-based technology associated with the Golden Dome program, which will depend heavily on Space Force sensors, interceptors, data fusion, communication capabilities. These are not modernization efforts or shifts from legacy missions. They represent new and emerging requirements for missions that have never been accomplished by a military space organization. These new mission areas will require new and stable resources over time to deliver. In FY26, we will have developed the blueprints, laid the foundational groundwork to continue these efforts in earnest. If the resources are made available, the Space Force will be postured to use them effectively in pursuit of these critical priority missions. Space gives us an incredible strategic advantage, but any advantage can become a vulnerability when held at risk. In the future, defending the homeland will demand that we first defend the satellites that make that defense possible. To be successful in this effort, we must be able to control the space. Protecting our capabilities in space while denying an adversary the ability to use space against us. That, in essence, is why you have a Space Force. It is the job of a military service to achieve superiority in the domain, and that's what we do for space. But if we want a Space Force that can secure our nation's interests in, from, and to space, we must resource it accordingly. In pursuit of this mission imperative, my priorities have remained consistent. Build comprehensive domain awareness, deploy resilient mission architectures, and develop the capacity to hold an adversary space assets at risk. To enhance our situational awareness, we are investing in additional sensors, data fusion capabilities, and the networks to rapidly put this information into decision-makers' hands. To assure our missions are resilient to attack, we are investing in proliferated constellations, investing in launch infrastructure to ensure steady and cost-effective deployment of capabilities, and developing protective measures for our satellites and networks. And finally, to hold adversary space assets at risk, we are investing in counterspace systems designed to defeat any attempt to use space capabilities to target our forces or our homeland. Because of the work we have already done, additional resources given to the Space Force will enable accelerated delivery and expanded capacity in each of these areas. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Space Force's FY26 posture. Our Guardians stand at the forefront of the newest warfighting domain. With the support of this committee, I am confident the Space Force will hold the line and advance our national advantage in space. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Now begin questions. Each member will be given 5 minutes to ask questions and answers. Your timer will turn yellow, 1 minute remaining. I'll recognize myself for the first round of questions. In my opening statement, I highlighted testimony that was given in this very room, I think it was 1977, with Admiral Rickover about his concerns about the rapid turnover in program management and lack of technical expertise that obviously wreaks havoc on complex technical problems. It might just, as a note, Admiral Rickover was given, I think, an order in 1950 to put a nuclear reactor on a submarine, the Nautilus. He did it in 3 years and launched the submarine. Things were done a little bit quicker in those days. Secretary Ashworth, to what extent do you believe Admiral Rickover is right that the churn in program management is a significant contributor to poor program performance?
Thank you for the question, Chairman. So coming from the background that I'm coming from, I've gotten to see this a lot over my time. I do feel it's very important that we have stability in program management, as well as the technical component of any program office as they're trying to deliver capability. Those are the two fundamentals that need to work hand in hand to be able to understand the engineering that's involved in a design, in developing a system, and understanding the risk that needs to be managed a lot of times in the technical area. So very important to try to have stability in those fundamental jobs. I do believe that the department has looked at this in the past. I do not know offhand, and I can get back to you on this, what our current policy is about trying to retain program managers for a length of time, especially on our major programs. That has been looked at, and it may actually, during this acquisition review that is coming up, may be one of the things that we should look at again.
Yeah, and the nuclear propulsion program, I believe the admiral in charge is given 8 years as a tenure for the propulsion program. I always thought the program managers for some of these highly technical programs should tie it to some kind of program milestone or deliverable rather than just a set period of years. Give them promotions, a regular career advancement, but it's important to keep these folks in place. And the reason why, and I want to ask this to General Alvin and General Saltzman, whatever rationale there is to rotating personnel in and out of these frequently results ultimately in depriving the warfighter of the program that we're trying to fund. We certainly saw that in the F-35. I was there in the beginning, and didn't quite work out the way we expected it to work out. And now that we're starting down the road on the F-47 and obviously Golden Dome, two potentially very extremely technical and expensive programs, do you believe that we should change our attitude about program managers?
Mr. Chairman, I certainly do agree that we need to look at these things. What I would offer is first, I mean, obviously, Admiral Rickover, when you're talking about nuclear reactors, there are very few things that require more of a single depth of technical expertise. I think as we do this, we need to understand how to merge the different parts. So you need to have the technical expertise and understand what all goes into the acquisition. There's also a role for an operational relevance to be fed into this. Maybe not nuclear reactors, because that science is that science. But when we look at the F-47 specifically, I believe we partially cracked the code on this, not only in ensuring that we have more stability in the program, but we had operators in there from the beginning. And when you do that, then you understand the operational impact of potential acquisition or technical decisions you might make. So I think there's a blending there. And associated with that, rather than just say the acquisition professionals will stay there 10, 15, 20 years, you touched on it, Mr. Chairman. We have to understand how to promote and advance them in a way and do it in an agile way to where maybe it's not the same as our operational expertise. So I think there's a way of blending those, but I wouldn't yield only to just having the technical expertise be preeminent without the operational impact and the operator in the technical mix from the beginning. And so I think there's a blend that has to happen there, to your point about not rotating through and having a continuity not only of the technical expertise, but also of the operational relevance.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily advocating to what Rick over. I think he was in charge of the nuclear propulsion program for over 30 years. But certainly what we're doing with some of these highly technical programs has not worked. And so we need to determine what we may do in the future. Ms. McCollum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I want to lay out where we find ourselves with, as we wait for the full 2026 budget request. We didn't get out our fiscal year 2025 work done on time, and that was no fault of the chairman of our full Appropriations Committee. He was there till the bitter end. We should have negotiated those bills in December or this spring, but the Speaker of the House decided he had a different plan. So that left us with a full year continuing resolution. 52 days after the President signed the CR into law, DOD and Congress still have not agreed on a spend plan. We have 4 months to go before the end of this fiscal year, and as the chairman pointed out, all we have in front of us is a skinny budget for next year. So how do we plan for the future? We don't have the spend plan for the previous year, and we know the numbers in the skinny budget are based on what? Because of cuts and things that DOJ has done as well, too. We also hear rumors that the full budget request might not come until June. So how are we supposed to write and mark up bills under that timeline? Clearly, this budget process is a total mess right now. The administration's skinny budget shows a freeze in top-line discretionary spending for defense, as I mentioned, and the department wants to move, the department's asking us to move between $50 and $60 billion in funding around in the base budget. Just move it, trust them. So gentlemen, the time is short. We have very few details on your priorities for next year. So I'd like you to talk about some of these projects you're asking for. The nuclear modernization, Sentinel, which is 80% over budget, the collaborative combat aircraft program, next-gen air dominance, space domain dominance, and then Golden Dome. Now, General Saltzman, you just mentioned some things that you think Space Force is going to be working on that's new to me with some of the requirements that you might have. We're also going to assume a 3.8 pay raise for the troops will be requested, and we don't know if the administration will fully fund the junior enlisted pay an additional $3.3 billion. So Acting Secretary Ashworth, we need more details on the 2026 budget. Your posture statement talks about combating China, restoring the war ethos, but it lacks a plan for us to look at, to react to, and have hearings and discussion about. So it seems like, to me, the department wants to do everything all at once, and obviously that's not possible, and we don't know what the priorities for spending or the priorities for actually getting things done in what order. So my question to you is, because I don't know, I haven't seen everything, do you expect the Air Force to be a donor or a receiver in this budget? And just exactly what do you think the top 3 priorities we should be focused on that you're going to be focused on in FY26? General Saltzman, the same question for Air Force. What are your 3 have-must priority programs? And I'm not trying to play stump the band. We just don't have any information, and we have to start having discussions amongst ourselves and then with our counterparts in the Senate. Gentlemen?
So thank you for the question, Ranking Member. So I'll start by saying the department is trying to finish up the relook on the PB26 and get over the request as soon as we can. We're going through the final stages of that right now. From an Air Force perspective, from a Department of the Air Force perspective, we've tried to do our best in this relook to make sure that we're aligned against the interim national strategic guidance. And so the big priorities that are laid out in that interim National Defense Strategic Guidance are to start out with strategic deterrence, nuclear deterrence, homeland defense, all those coupled. And so if you unpack that a little bit, strategic deterrence, nuclear deterrence, B-21, Sentinel are going to be top on our list to be getting after and making sure that we're fully funding. If you take a look at the Homeland Defense side, you're going to be taking a look at the capabilities that we've already provide Northcom to perform that mission. You're going to be taking a look at our operations on the southern border, and then you're going to be taking a look at Golden Dome. The department is working through the final stages of pulling together the concept and the final initial plan to take up to the Secretary of Defense on Golden Dome and then take over to the President for his chop. Once the President gives the thumbs up, we'll move into the more detailed planning stages. But you can think from that kind of a perspective that Golden Dome is going to be a large systems of systems kind of a construct. It will have space sensing, space effectors. It'll have air sensing, air effectors, as well as ground sensing and ground effectors. All has to be knitted together too by a C2 and a battle management type of a structure. So those are the big building blocks that the team is working with to try to construct, to present to the President, and to get a thumbs up on that. And then the next layer down is deter China in the Indo-Pacific. And with that comes our entire force design mix in order to be able to counter that threat in that theater. And you'll hear things like NGAD, the next generation air dominance family of systems, which is comprised of the F-47, collaborative combat aircraft, and a government-owned reference architecture as we move forward.
Thank you.
Those are the big ticket
I did
items.
read your testimony. So, before the other generals respond, you know, I don't know how I budget on a concept. I don't do that in my personal life. I'm certainly not going to do it with the taxpayers' money. And I know you're trying to provide information, but you can see the quandary we are all in up here. And so you expect, from your list, you expect in the Department of Defense, then I would say, to be a receiver in this budget, especially with Golden Dome and it not a donor to the other services.
Yes, I can't say for sure at the end of the day who will be giving, who will be receiving, but we've laid out the priorities, and I think the Air Force is in a good position to receive the budget that we need.
Secretary covered it very well. So donor receiver, those will be final decisions. I think we've made a very broad case when we were directed to look at how we would prioritize some percentage of our budget to reprioritize to the President's priorities. We found that some of those priorities were very similar to things that we were already doing. So when we did those, our United States Air Force said three things, and the first two are tied for first: Homeland Defense and Homeland Defense, threats in and through the air, and 2/3 of the nuclear triad. So the Secretary said it. The things I would assume that we would get, these would be our priorities. This is going to be Sentinel once it's restructured, making sure that comes through, and all of the associated B-21, the B-52, those, the LRSO, those keep the nuclear returns. Second is Golden Dome. Whatever Golden Dome turns out to be, there are a few things we're pretty much sure we know. Part of that has to be defense of the homeland from air and cruise missiles. And so that will be something that not only works for us in the homeland, but the United States Air Force is going to need to scale that overseas. So those technologies, those capabilities are not just going to be boutique for one part of the national security apparatus. So I believe those are going to apply both in the home and expeditionary. So I would see the capabilities as well as the command and control, the architecture that puts it all together, that enables us to sense, make sense, and act. Those sort of things I think will be at the top of the priority list to enable those systems to work. And then in the power projection, Secretary Ashworth talked about it as well. This is F-47. This is collaborative combat aircraft. This is doing the counter-China strategy to be able to show that we can penetrate, clear the skies, and enable us to continue to project power into China. So those would be the priorities we're looking for. I believe that there's a good place for the Air Force to be a receiver rather than a donor, but I'm not going to get in front of the administration.
Thank you for the question. This is important. I agree with you. Accelerating proliferated constellations. This is what creates resiliency in our missile warning architecture and our data transport layer. It's critical to the joint fight. Right now, they can be easily held at risk by adversary action. The more we proliferate, the more that's a targeting problem. More money means I can deliver that proliferated constellation faster. Second is counter-space capabilities. While we have invested in the technology associated with them, we haven't built them to the capacity where they can actually hold enough targets at risk. So not only do we have to invest in the system, but we have to increase the capacity to actually meet the O-plan requirements. So counter-space capabilities, and I'm happy to follow up in a classified setting to give you more details on that. And then lastly is the test and training infrastructure. This is the simulators, the ranges, the digital environment that allows us to test our equipment, make sure the new systems we're bringing on are effective, that our tactics can be validated in a simulated environment, and we give our operators the training they need to be successful.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank the gentlelady. Mr. Cole, Chairman Cole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you. And once again, I find myself in broad agreement with my friend, the ranking member, in terms of the process. We did not get, honestly, a bill done in the late post-election period and then again in March, and I regret that. There's plenty of blame to go around on both sides. I also wish we were getting full budget faster. I certainly don't hold any of you gentlemen responsible for that, and I've had good talks, honestly, with the administration on, if you expect us to avoid this next year, speed would be helpful in just getting this committee the information it needs. We've had some good cooperation on that. Skinny budget's helpful. But obviously, particularly this committee of all of them, subcommittee, needs the information. The amount of responsibility on both sides of the aisle here for by far the biggest part of the budget is pretty awesome, and each and every one of these members needs the information to make constructive input and then tough decisions. I have a couple of specific questions. Retirement of the E-3 AWACS aircraft, I have Tinker Air Force Base in my district, so we've been following that very closely. I was very pleased to see the E-7 contract signed off in August. Since we don't have a full budget request yet, we don't know, exactly whether or not the 2026 expenditure on that will be adequate. I will tell you, I've been concerned, and again, I put the blame on Congress, not on the military, but we've done a lot of robbing Peter to pay Paul and come up short in mission capabilities, and this is one where, I don't have to tell any of you gentlemen how old those airframes are and how much this is needed. But we also have space assets that are projected to offer great capabilities to our warfighters. Some have been delivered, some, obviously in the process. We understand there's a lot of change there. So I want to ask, if I may, General Alvin, General Saltzman, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts more about how the Department of the Air Force is thinking about pivoting some missions from aircraft to space, and do you agree that we will still need to maintain air capability up to and perhaps even after space is fully online?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that. And boy, you got that right about the E3. We are using that, and it is continuously in demand. The ability to actually command and control and manage the battle in real time has never gone away. And so even though we may not be in a major conflict, the ability of the E3, degrading as it is still under high demand. And so when we have a fleet of 16 aircraft left with a mission capable rate of about 37%, that is a dying platform that has diminishing manufacturing of supplies that just aren't going to come. So this is not something that we can maybe put the paddles to and resuscitate. To that point, the ability to sense, make sense, and act. There are great opportunities as we look into space for more opportunities of ubiquitous coverage and those sort of things the airborne layer is becoming more challenged to do because the adversary is pushing us further and further out. However, we have to do more than just sense. We have to sense, make sense, and act. And right now, the E7 is the platform that delivers what the E3 can with greater capability. So as the Department of Defense looks through this architecture, whether it be Golden Dome or the architecture in the contested environment, it's going to be very important that the migration from air to space covers all of those, the sensing and the making sense and the directing. And I will yield to my brother from space on the things that are available in the near term with respect to sensing from space, but I think we just need to ensure that we're adequately covering all parts of that as we do that migration before we just go from one domain to another specifically.
I think General Alvin said it great. I'd just add to it that space offers a lot of advantages, particularly in a contested environment, but it isn't necessarily optimized for the full spectrum of operations that your military is going to be asked to do. And so I think you'll get unanimous consent by all the chiefs when they say a mix of capabilities to make sure that we can cover a full spectrum of operations and truly offer the Secretary of Defense and the President a full range of operations is the ideal situation. And so no one system is going to be perfectly optimized to take care of the full spectrum of ops. And so that's where I think you need a mix of systems.
So just to be very clear, as I understand it, you really think we need both and an overlap of those capabilities, at least for a time. Is that correct?
I certainly believe we need the capabilities from whatever domain or platform or system it comes. We need to ensure we have the resilience to do the sensing, making sense of that, and acting.
Okay, thank you. Secretary Ashworth, just a quick concern. I know this committee is very focused on, frankly, the atrophy of our industrial base, the challenges that that presents to the military. We're losing a lot of smaller manufacturers that made components for particularly some of our aging systems. I believe we have a lot of aging systems at Tinker Air Force Base, and those men and women do an unbelievable job keeping 50, 60, 70-year-old airplanes combat ready and operational. But getting the parts to maintain that or having, frankly, any predictability when you tear one of those apart, what you're going to find. I mean, they're so far beyond any lifespan that was predicted or required. It's really, I mean, these people are much more artisans than they are, technicians and mechanics. Give us some idea of how you are looking at additive manufacturing, and other things that might produce and let us close some of the gap we have in some of our lost industrial capacity.
Thank you very much, Chairman, for that question. So appreciate it. So the previous administration had laid out a national defense industrial strategy on how to actually robust up our defense industrial base, and we're carrying that forward in implementation plans. I'm encouraged to see this administration has taken that up as well. You'll see that in one of the executive orders that are talking about acquisition reform, and that includes getting after our industrial base to try to create a more robust, resilient defense industrial base. When it comes to advanced manufacturing, additive manufacturing, we're looking at that across the board in the Department of the Air Force right now. Some of those areas that you're talking about, trying to get after spare parts, trying to take a look at diminishing manufacturing sources, those are key areas where we need to continue to mature how we're trying to use advanced manufacturing in those areas to get after those issues. But the list goes on and on and on, and we could share more offline with you.
Yeah, I would appreciate that. I really do think, and I know Chairman Calvert spent a lot of time thinking and look at this. I think we have actually a couple of really unique openings where you might be able to leapfrog pretty quickly and bring down the cost of parts, bring down the cost of munitions, bring up the supply of both. So very much would appreciate the open dialogue and the input from the department on ways we can do that, because I don't think we can do business at normal, as usual, and get to where we need to be in a short period of time. So again, thank you for working on that. With that, Mr. Chairman, yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to remind members to please talk directly into the mic for our communication team can write down your testimony. Mr. Cuellar, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member. Thank you all for being here. Want to talk a little bit about the southern border, if you don't mind. We just had the Secretary of Homeland and the men and women in blue and green do a great job, but they're limited, and I think you all can bring another asset. And again, without violating Mexico sovereignty, I know both presidents have been talking about that. There's a lot of things that I think you all can do without violating Mexico's sovereignty, whether it's in ISR, communication, targeting capabilities. There's a lot of things that you can do, and I can go down a list of U.S. Air Force assets or Space Force assets. I'm not going to go into that, but I think you know which ones I'm referring to. But some of the things we're seeing is that you got the Mexican cartels that have a lot of money, and they don't have the same procurement rules that you have or Homeland has. They just, for example, they'll go to Best Buy and buy everything that's there and then just use that. And as an example how serious some of these things can be, we've been talking about drones, but just a couple of weeks ago, a Border Patrol drone in the Laredo sector, my area, was taken down by cartel operators. This means that the cartels now have technology that can take down law enforcement drones, which means that they have a continuous side of what Border Patrol is doing, when they change shifts, everything. They got all that. Well, we're trying to go through some procurement process. Again, you all have, and I'm looking at the list of assets that y'all can use, both from the U.S. Space Force assets and from the Air Force. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you can do? Because we're trying to help Border Patrol, and now that the president wants the military, and I think there's a limited role for the military, but there's an important role for you all to play, and I'll welcome you. Tell us how you can help secure the southern border.
Well, thank you, Congressman Quer. I'll speak very briefly from the Air Force side. You know, as the organized, train, and equip organization, we really yield to what the combatant commander, who has given the overall mission, looks to do. And so we answer really operationally through our AF North commander to General Guillot, Northcom commander. So they put together the plan, and they put together the objectives and all of the criteria, and then from them they solicit and they request forces. And so we respond to those demands, and so I really wouldn't want to get in front of the operational commander, who's General Guillot. However, as you mentioned, you have a pretty long list of the forces available. And we've made those available, and there's a force management process to which they're requested, and then we provide them. And to date, this is Homeland Defense is number one, as I said. So we're certainly willing to provide what General Guillot needs. And so far, we've been able to support his requests, as well as the requests of the U.S. Transcom commander, if that actually becomes in the mobility portion of that. But to date, we've been able to support U.S. Northcom as well as the Transcom requirements with very minimal and mitigatable risk to the rest of the global mission for our Air Force.
I'll just add to that, Space Force is still growing, still in establishment. We don't quite have service components in all the combatant commands. U.S. Northcom being responsible for the border, we do not have yet a service component in there. But with the critical capabilities that we can provide, I wanted to make sure that that was integrated into the planning. And so we realigned another one of our components to make sure that they were supporting U.S. Northern Command. So we have a 3-star command now that handles all the space activities, handles requests for intelligence information, and that staff has been provided directly to General Guillot. So he has direct access to all the capabilities that we have to offer.
And we've sat down already with General Guillot. I think he's going to be fantastic. As you know, we got Northcom, you got Southcom, and how it's divided. But again, from your experience, anything you can provide the General, we really appreciate, because everybody talks about the southern border, but we really have the assets. I mean, this thing about these drones, where now the cartels are knocking down our Border Patrol, and we still haven't reacted to it because we got to go. I mean, those are some of I can go into a lot more specific issues, but I just wanted to highlight that one out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Rogers, Sherman Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me follow up briefly with Chairman Cole's line of questions. Mr. Secretary, as China ramps up its aggression in the Indo-Pacific, many here are concerned about our ability to rapidly surge forces and material into that theater half a world away. Strategic airlift, the backbone of that capability, frankly, is showing some signs of strain. Today, our airlift fleet is half the size it was in the 1990s. Our C-5s and 17s aging, flying relentless tempos, and there's no production line to fall back on. What's the Air Force plan to preserve and modernize our strategic airlift fleet when the backbone of that capability is aging, shrinking, and out of production? Sir.
Thank you for the question, Congressman. So as we took a look at this, global mobility remains a core mission of the Air Force, and it will always be a core mission of the Air Force as we move forward. And it's an amazing capability that we provide through our DoD fleets, augmented by civilian fleets as well through the craft. And so what we're doing right now is we're following the normal process and trying to understand the future threat, trying to understand the demand, and then put it through a capabilities-based assessment that'll examine all of that and try to determine what exactly the capability gaps that we need that we're going to need to close in the future. From that point, then we're going to follow on into an analysis of alternatives, which is then going to narrow it down for the acquisition world as to what we should really be pursuing as our next generation airlift.
General Alvin, does this year's budget meaningfully move the needle on maintaining global mobility and lift capacity? Or are we simply managing the decline of a critical capability?
Well, thank you, Congressman. I have to tell you, first of all, it hurt my heart a little bit when you talked about the C-17. I was one of the early test pilots on the C-17, so I wrote down that it's aging, shrinking, and less productive, and I thought, I wonder if that reflects on myself as well. But I love that aircraft, and it has been used quite a bit because it is an amazing platform, as are the airmen who operate it. So I've been in contact with Johnny LaMontagne, the Air Mobility Command Commander, talking specifically about this, because while it is getting older, it still has a lot of life left in it. But which means now is the time for us to work on it. So this idea of next generation airlift, we have the opportunity to augment with commercial lift. But as the Secretary mentioned, it's the Civil Reserve Air Fleet. That can handle certain kinds of cargo, but there are certain kinds of cargo that only the C-17 can carry into certain kinds of environments into which it's the only one that can carry it. So looking at those environments into the future, I think your question about is it moving the needle, I think we're moving the intellectual needle right now, because in order to understand to make the right investment, we need to understand what the options are for the future. And so I would say we are looking at it now, and it's not too early. And if I might, this is also one of the areas where there are also other foreign customers who very much like the C-17. So there may be lots of opportunities here for a platform to move forward that provides a capability, not only for us, but for our allies and partners. And so, once again, to answer your question, I think we are moving forward in the development of the conceptual, but we aren't breaking or bending metal right now and building new platforms.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Mr. Case.
Thank you, Chair. Secretary Ashworth, when we passed the FY 2025 continuing resolution for the rest of this year, Congress also provided funding tables to the Department of
mic on.
Defense. I'm sorry.
Ed, is your mic
Yeah.
on?
Congress also provided funding tables to the Department of Defense, setting forth our expectations and instructions on how to spend that money. Are you following those funding tables? Is there any exception to your following the funding tables?
I am aware that we provided the spend plans as requested and tried to make the best adjustments we could to make up for the difference between what we were expecting in a budget and a full appropriations compared to what we got through a full year for a full year continuing resolution, which was about $4.6 billion less. And so those are the issues that, as we were moving through this process, by the way, we appreciate the additional flexibility that this committee and Congress put into that continuing resolution that made it a little bit more flexible than a regular continuing resolution, but we still had significant issues on trying to reconcile that $4.6 billion. And so when we provided our spend plan, we tried to make the adjustments within appropriation that we could to try to get after those issues.
Okay, I think I'm going to take that as a good faith effort to follow the funding tables. I just wanted to know of any unknown, undisclosed deviations from the funding tables. None of those?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to follow up on Ms. McCollum's questions because I'm also trying to make some sense in anticipation of actually making decisions on this budget for FY 2026 of a lot of different things that are going on. So the first one is we started out at the beginning of this year with the instruction to all the services to at least come up with a scenario to reduce by 8%. Okay, and presumably all the services went through that scenario. Then what happened next is that you came out with a skinny budget which was level funded, which would imply that nobody went through an 8% reduction, maybe internally. If I'm not mistaken, there's been no allocation of the skinny budget to any of the services. So presumably, the decision as to actually where you are going to allocate that skinny budget is still outstanding, and that probably plays back into your evaluation of the 8%, I would assume. But you also have a reconciliation package, which significantly increases the budget over and above the regular appropriations process, and I'm not aware of that actually being broken out into services. I see that some of the services, for example, the Army, who's going to be here tomorrow, are acting on the assumption that they do not have an increase in that budget, and are actually issuing orders right now to the force to change various approaches to comply with that budget assumption. So I guess the question really is, in all of that fluidity, what's actually happening with your department, with the Space Force and the Air Force? Are you still very fluid as to what your final numbers are in FY 2026? Or have you narrowed it down? Are you starting to focus in on 8% savings possibilities, or is it going to be an up or what? Can you just get into a little bit more where you are right now?
So at this point in time, we've been continuing to work internal to the building on deliberations on exactly what you've been talking about. What is going to go into the final budget, and the budget, as I understand, is going to be two parts in our request. It's going to be a mandatory spending and discretionary spending. And so there will be an appropriations piece and a reconciliation piece as part of the request that we're making. And so we're going
Is there
through.
an allocation of the reconciliation as between the services?
I have not seen an allocation to us, but there is absolutely work going on within the building to allocate resources against one or the other as we move through this.
Okay, so if the reconciliation bill came before Congress tomorrow and had a request for that, what is it, 100 and some odd billion of extra money on the mandatory side through reconciliation, we would have trouble actually splitting that up right now. I mean, that's what I'm interpreting you saying. We don't
My
really-
understanding, when you receive the budget from OMB and it comes through the department, is that it will be broken out for you as to what is in the appropriation and what is in the reconciliation part of those bills.
Okay, and can you say right now, and if you can't, that's fine, can you say what the net effect is for the Air Force? What kind of shooting target should we anticipating here?
I cannot say right now before the budget is released.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Womack.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks to the gentlemen for being here today as witnesses, and I'm going to follow up on Mr. Case's remarks here in just a second. But General Lowen, thank you very much for your time the other day when we talked a little bit about a project in my district, the FMS mission for the F-35 and our allies and partners who are going to be rotating through Fort Smith, Arkansas to see our world-class facilities and our world-class airspace. We're excited to have Germany, Singapore, Poland, Finland, Switzerland, Greece, and the Czech Republic in the years to come. But in the meantime, Congress has to do its job. And our job, the job of this Appropriations Committee, is to fund the discretionary side of government to include national defense. I'm a little skeptical about the fact that we've partnered the reconciliation with the base defense bill. That could be problematic. But I'm curious, from your standpoint, what capabilities are threatened by the inability of Congress to actually execute an FY26 appropriation bill on time? And how does this impact the core mission of of your Air Force and our ability to project power and demonstrate dominance as we often have?
Well, Congressman, thanks for the question, and also I really appreciate the dialogue. As you know, we have our first two graduates coming up this week from Ebbing, and if I could share with the committee that
Please do.
talked to the Singapore Air Chief last week. He said we came looking for a place to train our F-35 pilots, and in Ebbing, we found a home. So that speaks to the community, that speaks to a very capable installation, and we are looking for the success into the future. It is hard, Congressman, to nail down a specific program that may be impacted. It's the accumulation of all of it. It's the inability for predictability of the funding that enables us to have weapon system sustainment, that year over year we can have the workforce predictability that will enable us to understand we can ingest a certain number of aircraft into depot maintenance that will allow the long-term readiness. So it is the accumulation of the lack of flexibility in funding as part of it to be able to respond to the fact that we don't have a predictability. So if we don't have predictability through an appropriation, we would certainly be helped by having more flexibility as we adjust to whatever the new methodology is by which we get resources. So it's, I think in general, the lack of a predictability makes it harder for others maybe to rely on us, for industry to rely on us as that reliable partner to generate the innovation that Chairman Calvert has talked about and ingest that into our force. So I think it's overall the lack of being a good, reliable partner. Now, we're not faultless in that either, but I think having the predictable appropriations to where outside industry, startups, innovative companies that want to come and be able to add to a new innovative Air Force that can adapt to disruptive technology and exploit that in the air domain, that I think is something that we're missing. It's an opportunity cost, I think, Congressman.
Speaking of opportunity cost, if I can piggyback on top of the budgeting issue, a recent article says that you're carrying about 20 to 30% excess infrastructure. Now, that, along with the maintenance of that infrastructure, help this committee understand what opportunity costs are not being met because of that excess infrastructure.
Thank you, Congressman. And I've mentioned it, and I just use this opportunity for clarifying. I am not, I appreciate that in the last NDAA, there's an interest in ensuring that we have the facilities and the places where airmen live and work be quality and safe. It is the fact that our Air Force has reduced by some 40–50% in the number of airmen and the number of platforms that we've lost over the last 30 years, but we've only lost 15% in number of installations. So we are carrying 23% excess, we call vertical infrastructure, buildings and structures where we don't need to have that workspace, and about 60% in some areas excess pavement and ramps. So all of that goes against a bill with which we need to keep it up and running that we're not using. And if we're going to have to spend twice as much on that, that's not helping airmen, that's too much tail and not enough tooth. So the opportunity cost is the ability to provide more actual combat capability. Now, I understand that it can be perceived as a BRAC is a terrible thing, and we'll all go to our, it does not have to be a BRAC. I would love to work with Congress to see if there are ways we can incentivize, rather than going piecemeal and having the wing commanders work with the local communities. Can we collectively incentivize opportunities for installations or things on federal property where maybe Congress can help others maybe use that infrastructure and get it off our books? Because then we can actually reapply those resources to actual combat capability.
Thank you. I yield back.
A point that Mr. Womack made, it was brought up, nobody likes continuing resolutions around here. But I was talking to the Secretary of the Army this morning, and obviously we've got to get these budget submissions in and as rapidly as possible. I think the chairman wants us to get some of these bills done by the end of June. It's the middle of May right now, folks, and so I would hope that we can get some information here as soon as possible. Ms. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member, and thank you all for being here. General Alvin, it was nice chatting with you last week. We took some time to talk about the quality of life issues about the airmen that they're confronting at Creech Air Force Base, which is only going to be compounded by the addition of the 500-plus service members, hopefully, as part of the collaborative combat aircraft coming to Creech. And I just wanted to confirm that I can receive your commitment to follow up with my team within the next 4 months on the status of putting together any necessary documentation. My understanding is we need 1391s, some unfunded requirement documents that would allow me to be advocate on behalf of Creech going forward.
Congresswoman, absolutely, and as a matter of fact, it's actually exciting what's going on at Creech, but your point is the right one. We need to make sure that while they're doing exciting work, these are airmen who are coming in a brand-new experimental operations unit that are going to teach the rest of the Air Force how to operate, how to maintain, how to sustain our collaborative combat aircraft. So we need to make sure they're doing it in a great working environment. And so the environmental impact studies to ensure that we have the proper child care. We talked about the health care availability, those sort of things. That is all part of that basing process that we will ensure we have the clear requirements and understand what the demand signal will be for the quality of life to support their quality of work.
Thank you. Yeah, just, for the remainder of the committee, as we transition to unmanned aircraft being at the center of our defense, Creech is critical. Nevada is critical, but Creech in particular, and that base is really lacking in terms of support for airmen, and it really does take a toll on them having to travel for health care, child care, housing, et cetera. So thank you for that commitment. I just want to, I have one more question that, this is for Mr. Ashworth, the Secretary. The Department of Defense is stated to target to reduce the civilian population of our civilian employees, 60 to 70,000 or 50, somewhere in that range. To date, this has been via the hiring freeze. Can you explain what that impact has been, and do you believe that you have the excess manpower to withstand these cuts?
So thank you for the question, Congresswoman. So as we're going through the execution of the presidential actions, executive orders, we're trying to lean forward as much as we possibly can in implementing them, but we're trying to balance that along the way, right? Some of these are providing good opportunities. The DRP, or Deferred Resignation Program, are providing opportunities for our folks to take advantage of it. But we're trying to be mindful of readiness and the mission as we go through those processes. So we have been given some tools along the way to make exemptions, and we're trying to make those smart exemptions to balance that equation. I don't have any target specifically on how many billets that we really need to remove at the end of the day. What we have initiated as well as a look at our entire structure, and go through a reorganization and an optimization of the structure. And what we plan to do is, as we work through these processes, is to reconcile both of those together, looking for efficiencies as we're going through the restructure, and marry those up to the processes that we're already following as we lose people through some of these efforts.
Yeah, I just honestly feel for you, because as the ranking member said, taking a hatchet versus a scalpel on top of our pressure for recruitment and retainment, on top of modernizing, it really seems almost like an impossible task. And I would like for you to expound on, is there anything this body can be doing to help you achieve the goals that you have?
No, I think we're in good shape right now to continue to work through these processes all the way through the end. We'll continue to maximize the use of exemptions to try to make sure that we're keeping our readiness and trying to keep our missions intact. But until I finish that exercise of trying to take a look at how we're going to optimize our organization, I won't have a clean picture as to where that leaves us in balancing those two variables together.
Thank you. I'll yield.
Thanks, gentlelady. And Mr. Anderholt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a couple of questions. General Saltzman, back in April of 23, U.S. Space Command outlined requirements for sustained space maneuver and dynamic space operations, and set the target for an operational demonstration by 2026. Can you speak to as how the Space Force plans to meet the U.S. Space Command target for an operational demonstration of sustained space maneuver and dynamic space operations by that deadline?
Yes, sir, thank you. We have on contract a demonstration of a refueling shuttle, a propellant depot, and satellites we call Tetra 5 satellites. Tetra meaning they have arms, they have refueling arms. That demo is scheduled to launch in 2026. We think that'll show a lot of positive results in terms of collecting the data on which of these types of capabilities, which of these types of technologies is most fruitful for the enduring mission. We think it'll be very positive. We're following that up with a second demo in 2027, which is actually 5 more different types of technologies associated with refueling on orbit. Again, the purpose is to collect the data, determine which ones are best, what standards we like, what interfaces are most productive so that we can continue to invest in that technology. So we're on track for 2026.
Okay, thanks. And with the certification of ULA's Vulcan rocket on March 26th, we now have multiple viable space options for the all-important National Security Space Launch mission. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of competition within space as a driver for both innovation and a source of resiliency?
Well, I think I'm preaching to the choir when I say competition is in the benefit of the government. It helps drive innovation, it helps drive costs down, but from my perspective, from my seat, it also creates resiliency in the architecture. It's my job to make sure we have assured access to space. If I have multiple companies that can help us deliver capabilities on orbit, I feel more comfortable that we have resilient architecture to put that in place. That's resiliency against any particular system that might have an anomaly where you would ground the system. We have alternates, we have backups. If a company has problems, we have alternates, we have backups. So the resiliency in the launch infrastructure is just as important as the competition driving the cost down is to me.
Thank you. Oh, and just let me, Secretary Ashworth, thank you for your service in this role as you, and we look forward to continue to work with you, but also ultimately with the Secretary once confirmed, or the next Secretary is confirmed. Given that this is an oversight hearing, I want to close by just bringing your attention to a persistent issue. And as you well know, the United States Space Command was established more than 6 years ago, and it's been basically homeless ever since. Despite the Air Force has identified Redstone Arsenal in North Alabama as the preferred location back in January of 2021. And the service has yet to designate a permanent location, however. I look forward to working with you and the incoming Secretary to finalize the basing decision that was validated by the Inspector General. In a budget-constrained environment, it's clear that Alabama is more cost-effective, and we have the brainpower and the robust defense industry that is able, that is willing, and is ready to support Space Command. And I look forward to working with this administration to bring us back on track and support our guardians and warfighters in this critical domain. And so I thank you for that. Look forward to working with you, and I yield back.
See, I already thought they made a decision to move to Alabama. We're going to call it the Shelby Air Base. Yeah, but, Ms. Capter, you're recognized.
Thank you very much for your testimony today. General Alvin, I have 2 questions for you, one for Secretary Ashworth and one for General Saltzman. The 2 questions are for the General. Recently, we read about the press reports, the revolution on the battlefield when the Ukrainians took down a Russian Su-27 with a drone. I'm curious how you looked at that and if you agree it was a revolution and why. Secondly, I'm wondering if you can describe to me, recently the President made a trip to Michigan and announced that we were going to have a new F-15EX fighter installation there. How will that relate to Ohio and the 180th Fighter Wing that I represent at our National Guard. Is there any connection? That is an F-16 unit. We tried to get F-35s, but they said we weren't close enough to a training base, so those are two questions. And then for Secretary Ashworth, what are your thoughts? How do you think about the state of our defense industrial base in this country and your critical workforce and production shortages that you face? And finally, of General Saltzman, when can we expect to receive a detailed budget related to our committee that for 2026? You've got the issue with Space Force. I don't even know what Golden Dome is. Maybe you can explain that in a written reply. But when do you think that we would be able to get a budget through the department? So General Alvin first.
Thank you, Congressman. Congresswoman, so in the two questions, first of all, the drone shooting down an SU-27. I don't know that I would call it as much of a revolution as it's a wake-up call. We need to understand that there are different platforms on the battle space, and the manner in which we use the aircraft that we have, the manner in which we have our operational concepts for aerial warfare need to adapt to this new reality. So I think I wouldn't take it as that one thing changes everything, but it certainly reflects the disruptive technology that can find its way onto the battle space, and it requires our rapt attention to make sure that we're responding to it in all environments. To the second, on the F-15EX, that was a presidential decision, and that decision was in order to replace the fighter mission that was going away with the A-10. I do not see any impact on that with anything going on in Ohio on the 180th.
Thank you very much. Secretary Ashworth?
Okay, I think your question was around the defense industrial base.
How do you think about it?
Yeah, so it's constricted over time. Everybody knows that story for over the last decades. And so we need to continue to do what we can to continue to grow the defense industrial base, to try to make it more robust and resilient, because that effectively just is in our best interest, because we'll grow competition and we'll benefit from that in the government side. In addition to that, though, we've gotten brittle in certain parts of our defense industrial base, and we need to be very mindful of understanding what those supply chains look like, and so that we can target those areas that are truly national defense related, so that we can make sure that we have additional suppliers in those areas as we move forward.
And those would be domestic suppliers?
Preferably domestic suppliers, yes.
Yes, our region has suffered greatly from this, the industrial heartland of America, so I would urge you to look at the defense industrial provisions that are in the law right now and try to make them more robust as you move forward with your budget. Thank you very much. And just one answer from General Saltzman.
I wish I had the answer to when the budget was going to be available. I do not. I don't feel comfortable even saying, guessing at what the timeline might be. If it was based on the number of meetings that we're having to try to get the budget in order, I would think it would be imminent. We're having a lot of discussions on the budget itself, but there are several wickets outside the Department of Defense that would have to go through before it comes over. But with regards to Golden Dome, I would just add, think about it not as a single system, but a system of systems. And so you'll see several different contributing capabilities that under the umbrella of Golden Dome. So I think that's probably a better way to think about it as it comes over.
Thank
you
the
very
gentleman,
much.
Mr. Carter.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Alvin, pardon my voice, it's going away. The Air Force continues developing agile combat employment concepts for the ENDOCOM, ENDOPANCOM theater. I'd like to ask you about a specific investment and capability being prioritized to improve camouflage, concealment, and deception. And in particular, can you walk us through the strategies you are using to enhance multiple spectral signature management? This is a critical issue, especially when it comes to survivability from our expeditionary forces that will be in the Pacific. I've also heard about deployable hangars that can support multi-special signal management. Are those capabilities ready to be fielded? And do you think these resources are things you need to get deployed quickly?
Congressman, I can answer the last question first. Yes.
Yes.
These are things we definitely, as you mentioned, when people think historically of CC&D, camouflage, concealment, and deception, we think of, things shaped like hangars or things shaped like airplanes to fool the adversary. The point that you bring up is the important one. It's no longer just the physical deception and the physical camouflage and concealment. Across the electromagnetic spectrum, that's how more and more the adversaries are being able to identify our capabilities. So being able to manage our signals, confuse them with where they think it's something and it's actually something else, that is more critical. It is also very much more agile, too. So getting those fielded capabilities are absolutely critical. They are not the only solution. We still do have to have the ability to hide from sight. We do also have, under agile combat employment, we have to have the ability to have some point defense. So when the missiles come in, we got to be able to kill them with something. So all of those come together, but your point is the right one. This electromagnetic spectrum management has become more and more key to our ability to survive and operate in an agile way. We really look forward to, as they continue to mature, we also need to exercise them and test them, and that's what we're also doing, big exercise this summer. But I couldn't agree more that those are the types of capabilities that will enhance our survival and make this agile combat employment a real thing.
So basically, you're ready to do it as you get it put together.
Absolutely, but to say it's got to be part of a family of systems to protect, but it's a key part of that family.
Yeah, I was very impressed by what they can do. Also, I want to ask you about the fact that we're very aware of the fact that the reserve component is asked to do much more for our nation's defense. And with that said, we recently, with public comments by you and other Air Force leaders, stated we need to have a larger Air Force to defend our nation and execute the National Defense Strategy. How can the Air Force Reserve retain experienced pilots, maintainers, and combat support personnel to defend America, as well as meet the NSD requirements, unless the Congress and Pentagon leaders provide the necessary amount of equipment and aircraft? Is the Air Force exploring options to equip the operational fighter units with sunsetting missions like the A-10 and with other airframes?
So, Congressman, that goes back to I do believe that more Air Force is better. And so in order to be able to do that, we have to ensure that when we do that, we maintain the capability of having the deployability and the accessibility. I think what the Air Force Reserves and the Air National Guard offer is that experience, is that instant proficiency. And so making sure we equip all the Air Force with the modern capabilities that are required to deploy is going to be key. It really is about dollars. I would love to be able to have the active force and the reserve force because, as you mentioned, Congressman, this is not the reserves of 30 years ago. They're operating with us. They're actually looking to do the same sort of organizational unit of action construct model that we're going to, so they can deploy just as rapidly as the active force. It really just is about dollars to be able to ensure we outfit everybody with the most modern kit and make sure the opportunity costs don't come with regret.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Morelli.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the ranking member for the hearing, and certainly thank you to our witnesses for your service. I want to begin, Secretary Ashworth and General Alvin, and take a moment to remember Major Terry Brayman from my district in Rochester, New York, who tragically lost his life in the CV-22 Osprey crash off the coast of Japan in November of 2023. I had the solemn honor of visiting Yokota Air Force Base and meeting with Colonel McElhaney 3 weeks ago, where Major Brayman was stationed, and I saw firsthand the strength and professionalism of the airmen and from his unit who continue to serve and serve in his memory. The platform itself has had some troubling safety record, and I understand that work is ongoing, but after multiple fatal incidents, it's fair to ask what changes are being made to the platform. So I wonder what specific actions the Air Force has taken to address known mechanical and design concerns, and how you're working to maintain confidence with the crew and who fly these aircraft?
Well, Congressman, not only thank you for the question, but thank you for publicly calling out the family. It's easy for us to move on and we see a tragedy and off we go to the next thing, but it reminds us that while we're working on the next day's issue, those scars endure for the family and for the unit as well. So thank you for reminding us and being our conscience on that. With respect to the CV-22 itself, I have ultimate confidence in our Air Force Special Operations Command Commander, Lieutenant General Mike Conley, working with the Navy, the Nav Air Systems Command Commander, Admiral Chebby, to ensure that we're finding the right material solutions. And in the prop rotor gearbox issue, we are looking to purchase those and retrofit those on the platforms. But let's take it from Gundam 2-2 till now. The Air Force Special Operations Command went down to the bare bones and looked at from aircrew proficiency, because the Air Force uses the CV-22 differently than the Marine Corps and the Army and the Navy do. And so because they're used for more special operations, infill and exfil operations, they require really more specialized expertise on the crew and more attention paid to the maintenance. So we needed to make sure we were doing everything possible. So we have more confidence in our ability to deliberately account for everything that's going on in the maintenance and our crew proficiency. So it's part of that's just increasing confidence. On the material side, we're working with NavAir and getting those weapon systems back up to par so we can confidently use them in the way the special operations community needs them. So they continue to perform well, but this is it's an aircraft that has a unique capability in operating in dangerous environments.
I don't know, Mr. Secretary, if you had anything to add to that?
No, just on that topic, the gearbox is effectively what the problem is and what the root cause of the situation is. And we're very close to working with the Navy of putting a contract in place that will start the removal and the replacement of those gearboxes. I think will actually happen this month or next. And then we'll be in a pace of being able to remove and replace about 3 of those a month as we move forward.
Well, I appreciate that very much. If I might, Secretary, Stratton National Guard Base, the home of the 109th Airlift Wing, the only unit in the United States military, I believe, flying the LC-130H ski birds, which are critical to our national security operations and scientific research, both in the Arctic and Antarctic. And the aircraft, I think, are over 5 decades old. I've had the chance to be on board one. Constant need of maintenance, risking mission readiness and aircrew safety. And given the strategic importance of the polar operations and operational limitations of the LC-130Hs, can you just share with me the Air Force's long-term plan to fully recapitalize the fleet and ensure uninterrupted U.S. leadership in the polar regions?
Yes, thank you, Congressman, for that question. So as I've taken a look at this, I'm not familiar with that mission, but I'd love to see it someday. As we take a look at those aircraft, they are aging, but as of right now in a fiscally constrained environment, we can't do too much for those aircrafts themselves right now. But we are actually initiating the beginnings of the acquisition process to do that capabilities-based assessment for that entire area, and that will then inform us as to what the true need is, what the gaps are, and then how we can initiate a replacement into the future.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'd love to continue to work with you and the department. I know they're cannibalizing parts, and it's really put a strain on their ability to be successful, and I know what is a strategically important part of the world, and they are unique in their ability to fly to it. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Just a point on that, Major Unrath came from Riverside, California, so right outside of my congressional district. He was flying that B-22, the Osprey. I'm just curious, since the issue's been brought up, obviously we've stopped in production on the V-22, moving to the Army program, Flora. Do you envision the Air Force or other services buying into that program? Obviously, we're going to have to retire the Ospreys eventually. You believe you'll having modified versions going to the Air Force and Special Forces and Navy, Marines?
Chairman, that may be something we're going to need to work with SOCOM. It certainly isn't the higher priority in our force design and in a budget-constrained environment where we're thinking about the...
I'm saying in long term. Do you think that would be the direction you might go?
I certainly think it's worth looking into. We don't have that on the top of mind right now, but certainly it's something to look into.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for the question. Mr. Elzey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member. Thank you all for being here. I'd like to start out by seconding Chairman Calvert's sentiments on the program managers needing long-term. That's the way to solve this problem, at least in the short term. But additionally, until we supersede Goldwater Nichols, until we scrub ITAR, and we fire a bunch of minions at the Pentagon, make the Pentagon a triangle, right now, the acquisitions process is like going on a cross country with your family. You're going from Galveston to Dallas, and you have to go through Houston. And you got yourself, unfortunately, a minivan. And you got your minivan, you have to stop through Houston, and every 5 minutes you have to stop for a minute at a stoplight. And at that stoplight, there's a patrolman, and he says, I need $100, and you need to take that passenger. So by the time you're out of Houston, you're overloaded, you're out of money, and you're broken. So you cancel the project. So we need a loop road around Houston. And in the near term, as we watch our budgets come down relative to actual spending, and until we get to 5% of GDP, we need the OSD, the COCOMs, and the chiefs of staff to be able to work together specifically on emerging technologies so that they can work faster on a block grant basis and get these emerging technologies out the door a heck of a lot faster. So I was noticing, thank you all for being here. Your CVs are outstanding. General Alvin, you're an astronautical engineer. That's from Air Force. I mean, you're the poster child. Poster boy, I guess I should say. Secretary Ashworth, you are an electrical engineer, and that's just incredible. And then somebody had fun at college, and it was you. And you went to study history at Boston and had a good time. And so I just thought that was interesting that you're the Space Force commander and you studied history. But I also want to point out that you two were missileers, an incredibly hard job. I wouldn't want to do it. I couldn't be capable of doing it, so thank you for doing that. But I'd also like to point out, General Saltzman, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but your profile photo makes you look like Buzz Lightyear, and I think it's absolutely appropriate. General Alvin, thank you for taking the time to talk to me about the F-47 a while back and the need for future air superiority and for the joint force to have sixth-generation fighters. So kind of a leading question, but would you say that the current mix of fifth-gen F-35 across the Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps provides a needed capability and important options for our COCOMs?
Yes, it does. And of course, once we get to the Block 4 and all those capabilities that really unlock it into the future, it's going to be that much more capable. But we got to get through TR3 on Block 4 to really make it the platform it should be.
Okay. Well, with that in mind, can you think of any reason why we shouldn't have a similar cross-service capability, Gen 6 capability in the Navy?
I think to that there are different requirements that the Navy would use it for. So this is specific, and I'll say as much as I can at this classification level, but when you look at the outer mold line design, that is, even the F-35 has difference between A's, B's, and C's, and those that launch off carriers have to have, more sturdy landing gear structure so they can go off the CAT and come back to the carrier. So there are some design differences, and when that comes to the high-level sophistication of sixth generation, one needs to look at the outer mold design differences and what that might provide for divergence capabilities. Having said that, the secret sauce of what we're doing going forward, and Chairman Calvert sort of referenced the fact that maybe the F-35 wasn't the best way looking back on how we're doing things, but we put that together when we did. Now, we own the government reference architecture. We own the mission systems. There is so much tech that is shared. There are so many of the systems that are shared between the Air Force and the Navy program, both of them moving forward, that those will, I think, always be common, and those will allow us to accelerate both programs a lot better. And we were talking earlier about the defense industrial base, allowing more to play in that because we own the government reference architecture. When it comes to the outer mold line, that will be different because of the different environment in which they operate.
Got it. Okay. Well, I think for China, as we focus on China, we all have to recognize that the F-47 brings increased speed and increased range. It's going to get the Air Force in the fight in the Indo-PACOM. The V-22 puts the Marines in the fight in the Indo-PACOM region. FLRAA puts the Army in the fight, and without FLRAA, they are not in the fight in the Indo-PACOM. Likewise, no F/A-XX, the Navy's not in the fight because we have to outstick the enemy, and we do that with a Gen 6 fighter. And until we get an improved tanker,
which we absolutely must have in the Indo-PACOM, we are limiting ourselves. And at no time in our nation's history have we ever gone an advanced generation with one service and not the other. So thank you for your answers. Thank you for being here, gentlemen. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Mr. Fleischman, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Ashworth, General Alvin, and General Saltzman for taking the time to come before us today. I would like the entire subcommittee to know that General Saltzman was kind enough to visit my hometown of Chattanooga last week to be the Grand Marshal of the longest-running Armed Services Parade in the United States, 76 years running, and as a first, for the first time, as we honored the Space Force. So, General, you were a hit, and I thank you so much for that visit. I've got some questions. First of all, challenges to the Sentinel program, dealing with the cost projections and the timeline of that ICBM program. As most of you all know, I'm chairman of the Energy and Water Subcommittee of Appropriations, and NSA's Y-12 security complex is in my district, so I realize the highest priority of this program. We've seen major delays and setbacks, so I'm going to try to condense my questions. Acting Secretary Ashworth, can you provide this committee with an update on the program's current status and what changes are being implemented to get the program schedule back on track and even pulled back to the left? And as a follow-up, we are modernizing all three legs of the triad. As well as our NC3 and nuclear security enterprise. At the same time, the New START treaty is set to end next year. How is the Air Force ensuring that we do not have a gap in our coverage during the period of growing strategic risk?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. So I want to just first state by the department stands behind the nuclear deterrence and our nuclear modernization programs. And so that remains a commitment and a strong commitment. The Sentinel program, non-McCurdy, it had a critical non-McCurdy breach last year. And so during that time, the department goes through a very thorough review process of the entire program to make sure that it's still a national security value. We assess the requirements on that program. We assess options that we might be able to follow in actually doing that in a different way. And then we also take a look at the root causes that actually manifested into the breach itself. We came out of that and then followed the law, and we pulled that program back into its previous acquisition phase. So that's where the program is right now. So what does the program do? First, it continues on with those elements in the design and development phase that will remain unaffected while we restructure the rest of the program to get after those root causes that caused the breach. And so think about that from the biggest piece of that as the missile itself will continue going through its design and development phase as we move forward. The main contributors to the cost breach itself or the command and launch segment. Think about those as the LFs that house the missile and the launch control centers that command the launch and have our missileers in them. It's the construction costs associated with those elements that really drove up the cost. And so the program right now is reaching out to industry to understand how we might better construct a program on how to get after that particular segment. They've reached out, collecting the information from industry, and by the end of the summer, they should have collected enough information, analyzed it, and put it back together to see if we're going to stay with the current acquisition strategy or significantly change it. I imagine we're significantly going to change it. Based upon that strategy, we're going to be trying to pull that schedule left as we continue to march forward on the program.
Thank you, sir. In my remaining minute, the K 135 has been in service for about 60 years, sir. The Air Force is now transitioning to the KC-46, which also includes important decisions on new basing requirements. This deals with our tanker fleet. Since I don't believe the projected tanker fleet over the next decade is sufficient to sustain a major prolonged war in the Western Pacific, what would be the necessary number that we should be targeting, sir?
I would just say that that demand signal is derived through the TRANSCOM commander, U.S. Transportation Commander, who looks to the Indo-PACOM war plan and looked at it. And so they have set up they have their MCS, which is their mobility capability study, and that drives the number of tankers and number of strategic airlift. And so they're currently in the broad number about 465. So they are between the KC-46 and the KC-135 recapitalization. We're still driving towards that TRANSCOM-derived number. And as we look further into the buy of the recapitalization, this is where the next generation air refueling system study will tell us whether we need a new tanker altogether or tankers that have better survivability mechanisms on them. So it really drives from the U.S. Transportation Command requirement.
Thank you, sir. My time's expired. I'll yield back.
Since Mr. Fleischman brought up the KC-46, all the bugs have been worked out on the KC-46. It's working optimally?
Not optimally. We have 5 Cat 1 deficiency reports. 2 of them have to do with the remote visibility system. I was with the chairman of Boeing Defense a week ago to go over each one of them. One of them has to do with the mass drain. One of them has to do with the sort of the sticky, the stiff boom operator, or the boom, and one of them has to do with the environmental control system. I am very much sitting next to the Air Mobility Command Commander with the Boeing Defense CEO to go through each of those line by line. It is producing. It can refuel all receivers except for the A10 and the E7, because we just haven't tested against that. So it is capable. It's not optimal yet.
How long is that going to take before you get to where you need to be?
The latest estimate on the pacing item is the remote visualization system, which again, it's operating. It's just not operating as we would expect it to. We're probably looking at another 18 months.
Okie doke. Mr. Valdeo.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Ashworth, General Alvin, and General Saltzman for testifying before this committee today. Secretary Ashford and General Alvin, I want to raise urgent concerns about the F-15EX bed-down plan and the future of the 144th Fighter Wing in California. I know we've talked about this, and I know others are talking about it as well. But will the decision to base the F-15EX in Selfridge Air National Guard impact the Air National Guard's wings currently stated to receive new F-15EXs, including the 144th Fighter Wing?
Thank you for the question, Congressman, and thank you for the time yesterday. So the President has made the decision to buy additional F-15EXs and to outfit Selfridge Air National Guard with those EXs to continue the fighter mission at Selfridge. Our next step in that process is to do the detailed planning on the implementation and exactly how we're going to perform that. There will be a flow out. We will do a detailed flow out of where we're going to put F-15EXs after they're coming off the production line. And I can say to you right now that there is likely a downstream impact on some other Air National Guard units, including Fresno. But as we go through that process, I commit to you to say that we're going to mitigate, we're going to first of all reduce to the minimum amount of time that we possibly can what that delay in getting the EXs to Fresno would be, and then mitigate that as well as we try to make sure that we've got you the best 15 Cs and Ds to continue the mission.
Okay, and that was going to be my next one of my questions is, if there's a change in delivery schedule, which sounds like there possibly could be, does the Air Force commit to requesting the O&M needed to keep the current aircraft operational? But it sounds like you might have something else in mind as well, or a possibility.
So we'll do everything that we can to make sure that the missions stay whole as we move forward.
All right, thank you. This one's on counter drones. How is the Air Force ensuring the funding for emerging technologies like drones and counter drone systems is prioritized, especially after incidents like the unknown drone flying over Langley Air Force Base and NAS Norfolk over the past few weeks?
So, Congressman, I understand that the Air Force has put together some rudimentary types of defensive capabilities, and we've initiated a program that will be moving out in '26 as we get those dollars to make a more modular, open, and expandable type of a capability, and we're going to start to outfit our installations with that capability as we go. You've probably heard from the previous administration, the Replicator 2 types of initiatives to get out after counter UAS. This administration maintains its concern with the counter UAS capabilities that we need to put forward, and you'll see more and more of that as we get into the '26 budget. I presume when we deliver it that we're going to be trying to get after that threat.
Thank you. General Saltzman, China has continued to develop and refine claw-enabled satellites that could target our assets in GEO. What steps is the Space Force taking to advance technologies like rendezvous, proximity, operations, and docking, and on-orbit servicing to counter this? And where do you see the greatest need for investment to maintain our space superiority?
We've got real solid investment in the GSAP program, which is our current capability to do rendezvous, proximity ops, and GEO. We're expanding that to include other kinds of counter space activities, and I'm happy to follow up in a classified environment with you if we can. But the most important thing that we need to add to it is the space domain awareness that enables the rendezvous proximity ops. Can we see the target satellite? Can we see where we are? Can we manage the distances between them? You're talking 23,000 miles away. We've got to make sure we have good, exquisite sensors that can detect that and give us situational awareness we need to be effective.
All right, thank you. Just a real quick question. Can you provide us with an update on Space Force's deployment efforts to improve resilient positioning, navigation, and timing?
Yeah, we're still working through we're shifting it from resilient GPS to resilient PNT. We're looking at all kinds of alternatives, and we have money in the budget for alt PNT programs and science and technology risk reduction.
All right, well, thank you, and my time's just about expired, so appreciate the time, and I yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Joyce. You might want to bring your mic up, David. Okay, there you go.
Might want to turn it on too, huh? I'm really watching that technology, I'm telling you. Acting Secretary Ashworth, we are carefully monitoring investments that countries like China are making to boost their defense production capacity. There are concerns that our current defense industrial base cannot meet the surge demand and will likely need the support of manufacturers outside the existing defense industrial base in the future. Does the Air Force have a strategic plan to increase and retain the capabilities of non-traditional defense manufacturers to support the Air Force surge demand if needed? And would you require any additional resources or funding to develop those relationships and capabilities?
Thank you for that question, Congressman. So I think the Air Force is doing a great job in trying to expand the defense industrial base. One of the elements that I'll bring up is the Next Generation Air Dominance family of systems. And General Alvin's also already brought up that we own a government reference architecture in that area. And that has really enabled us to grow the defense industrial base in that area. And you're seeing some of the non-traditionals that are starting to grow and become more of a traditionals enter into that competition for collaborative combat aircraft, for instance, right? And so I think we're doing the right thing. We're moving in the right direction. If we continue to follow the model that NGAD has set up for us, we need to try to replicate that into the future, and it's going to provide additional opportunities for those non-traditionals.
At the Youngstown base, unfortunately, we've watched C-130s having to be cannibalized to make out of, say, 8, 5 are operating and 3 are sitting there as pieces and parts. So I know that it's tough to keep a reserve of all the parts that are dependent upon making the mission work. General, I wanted to go back to you. How is the Space Force working to build our cyber resilience into satellite command and control systems as threats continue to evolve?
We're growing into that mission area pretty quickly. We've deployed 2 systems recently that allow us to monitor our networks, our mission networks. It takes a lot of time actually to map the cyber terrain and then telemeter it, put all of the right sensors in so that you can rapidly see if somebody's attacking the system. We've taken care of missile warning as a mission area already, and we're going towards the GPS constellation next. And so we're stepping it out as we can, but it takes a while just to map that terrain, but we're taking steps as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Most of the questions I had otherwise had already been asked. I realize it's late, Chairman Calvert, so I'll give you back the remaining time.
I thank the gentleman, and I appreciate your questions. Ms. McCollum, you have any closing comments?
Well, I just want to thank the gentleman for being here, and I want to thank the acting secretary for your professionalism, the courtesies you extended all of us and everything like that. And I hope there's a role for you that continues in this administration, should you choose to accept it. Mr. Chair, I'm just going to list them really quick, some questions for the record, because a lot of it I just want to put them officially out there. I kind of had them in an opening statement. This one I did not. The president has now halted bombing actions towards the Houthis, but I'm going to be submitting a record to find out, what the cost of this was, both in material and personnel, what we've been spending. Workforce impacts, I think I touched on that, a little more detailed question. The tariff question that has to do with the most expensive aircraft in the world, the F-35. It looks like the administration is going to use something called a Chapter 98. I want to understand how that works better. Space launch availability. I know that that's a concern that Space Force has. As was pointed out, what is going on with safety measures with the Osprey, the Trainer 17. And then, Mr. Chair, I know you have lots of questions, as I do, on Sentinel, Golden Dome, and the timelines for Air Force One. So thank you, gentlemen, for being here. With that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
I thank the gentlelady. Before we conclude, I want to thank all of you for your testimony and your answering our questions. There'll be a number of questions that we'll be submitting for the record. Obviously, you have a lot of challenges ahead of you. As the ranking member mentioned, the Sentinel program, obviously we have to get that back on track. We're going to get a plan. Need a plan on Golden Dome. Understand what where we need to go, and this is going to be a large project. Seems every contractor in town seems they are looking to get a piece of the action. So we need to know where we're going with this thing before we lose control. And obviously, we have a number of challenges that we need to get through, and we'll be working with you through all of them. So with that, thank you, and we are adjourned.